Welcome to an end of the year program for us here at Solelo Moore. My name is Ajmal Binding, and with me is Merapelo Letebele, who we're going to talk about some of the things that we've accomplished, but also an upcoming interview that we're going to have related to this. So, Merapelo, can you share us a little bit more of what you're working on and what's going on and the developments you've done in Southern Africa?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Ajmal. It's been a very hectic year, and I'm happy that it's finally coming to an end. We can get ready for the next year. As you know, my assignment was to try to get Africans in the motherland and Africans in the diaspora to try to get closer together. And we were supposed to also find ways to facilitate conversations that can lead us to having, you know, intertribal or intertribal conversations amongst Africans here in Botswana, and also to deal with one of the issues that I believe is one of the things that are holding Africa back, that is of patriarchy. So I have a very interesting interview today. I think you will like it and the viewers will like it. I interviewed a very prominent member of the Botswana Society. His name is Dr. Sidney Pilane. He is PhD at law, and he's a very interesting man. He has served at very high levels of government in Botswana and also in the courts in South Africa. So I think you should look forward to hearing his views on all these three issues together.
Yeah, but we're looking forward to this, and thank you very much.
My name is Sidney Pilane. I practice as an advocate, as a senior advocate, both in Botswana and South Africa. I became a lawyer in 1983 after I qualified with a Bachelor of Laws. In 1994, I graduated with the MBA, and in 2019, I graduated with a PhD. I practiced law until 1997 when I went to work as a chief director in the Department of Justice and International Justice and Constitutional Affairs of the government of South Africa, where I worked for about 18 months. I then went to practice as an advocate at the bar in Johannesburg until President F.G. Mogai of Botswana asked me to come back to Botswana to work in his office as a special advisor. I worked for him from the year 2001 in the office of the president in Botswana. And when he retired on the 31st of March 2008, I retired with him. I didn't want to continue under the new government, so I returned to practice, both in Botswana and South Africa.
Can you just give us a summation of the legal atmosphere and universe in South Africa and Botswana? What are the differences, the main differences?
There isn't really much in terms of differences. Our legal system in both countries is the Roman Dutch law, which is the same as in Scotland, but is different from most other systems. It's the same as in Scotland and in the Netherlands. I think those are the only countries in the world where they have the Roman Dutch law as the legal system. All other systems are English, common law, continental, etc. And Botswana and South Africa, there isn't really much difference. In Botswana, we learn a great deal from South Africa. To some degree, in terms of commercial legislation, South Africa learns from England.
I think I knew prior to this interview that you got your PhD from an American university.
Walden University, yes.
Yeah, so, and did you study in the UK?
My LLB was as follows. We did the first 2 years in Swaziland at the University of Botswana and Swaziland. We then went to Edinburgh University for 2 years and returned to complete our final year in Swaziland at the University of Botswana and Swaziland. At that time, it was the University of Swaziland, but our qualification, our program, was that of the University of Botswana and Swaziland.
No, I was just going to say what the differences were. Obviously, when you are learning from different law systems, you see the changes, and it also puts you in a position to be dispensable in any of those jurisdictions?
There is a reason why it was the University of Edinburgh and not any other university, for example, in England or Wales or Northern Ireland. It's because Scotland is the only Roman Dutch jurisdiction in the UK.
No, the reason why I wanted to ascertain your legal pedigree was just so that we can ease into the next question that I want to raise with you. I work with a non-government organization in the United States called Movement in Omaha for Racial Equity. And what I do is I run a program here in Botswana where I try to link Black Africans with African Americans in different ways. One of the ways that we try to do that is that we believe that if Black people everywhere in the world came together to form some semblance of unity in whatever formation it might be, it could be better for Black people to speak in one voice on issues of race. Because as you know, African Americans were taken to America as enslaved peoples against their will, and now they are citizens of the world in so many other places. Yet they still suffer from discrimination, and which is a little different from us in Africa. When colonization ended, we pretty much retained the bulk of our independence and our freedoms. But they are still in a difficult situation, even though they live in what is touted as the world's best democracy. So the idea is, if we talk about things that can bring Black people together, maybe we can combat global racism as a united front. So now my next two questions will be leaning in that direction. And the first question is, do you think that, number one, African unity is plausible or even desirable for Black Africans in the true sense? And the second question will be, what do you understand Pan-Africanism to be?
I think the place to start is in Africa. We ourselves have our divisions, which divisions come from the past, and unfortunately they persist because of the nature of the history that we have had. But in my view, integration solves all problems. We are suspicious of one another. We have views concerning one another which are founded on ignorance. We need to get to know one another more. And the only way in which we can do that is if we integrate, is if we come together. I understand that economic conditions in the different countries and therefore the constitution, the competition that arises from that makes it difficult for us to accept integration. But we do need to integrate. And I think it is one of the principles upon which SADC was founded, that there is a need for Africans to integrate. There's a need for the region to integrate. And I think it is one of the principles upon which the African Union, previously the Organization of African Unity, was founded, that we need to integrate and become one people and live in one continent, pretty much live together in one continent and do everything together. The integration of SADC, the integration of the continent, and the integration of all diaspora, all African diaspora.
What do you think has been the reason why unity or integration at the least has remained elusive to African states, especially in SADC?
I think these things are historical. I do not want to appear to blame other people for our own problems, because the cause of our problems are ourselves. But these divisions occurred in the context of colonialism, in the context of our interaction with people from other continents, particularly with Europeans. They came amongst us and they enhanced whatever divisions already existed amongst us, because it was in their interest that they should divide us further, because that was the only way in which they could rule us. They had to divide us in order to be able to rule us and for their rule and control to take hold. But now that they're not really here anymore, they do not control us anymore, they no longer have quite the sort of influence that they did over us before, it seems to me that it is now our opportunity, led by our leaders in each country, to recognize that it is in the best interest of each of our countries, in the best interest of the region, and in the best interest of the continent, and all of us blacks, wherever we exist, that we should come together, because it is only when we do that that we are strong enough to overcome our competition and all else that undermines us as a people and as a race of people.
Okay. So are you familiar with the Pan-Africanist thought, and what are your views on it, if so?
Pan-Africanist thought is basically that Africans should come together and that we should live and do things as one people. And I think it incorporates the diaspora, that all black people, all people who originally came from Africa, should come together. I think that is a part of the philosophy of Pan-Africanism, that we are all best off when we are together than when we are separate, as is the case now.
Do you have anything to say about the recent political change that occurred in Botswana?
Interesting. I don't think anybody quite expected it to happen in the way in which it did. I think most people expected us to have a hung parliament, out of which would grow a coalition government. Now we have what has been a coalition, and this thing, an opposition party since 2010, become the new government. And I think a lot of Africans have been celebrating that. I think it's given a lot of Africans a lot of hope about change occurring in their, particularly political change occurring in their countries.
What do you think has been the hang-up? In countries like Zimbabwe, we know that the ZANU-PF has the country on a chokehold, and it has caused a lot of consternation. And what do you think needs to happen in Zimbabwe for things to get better?
What needs to happen everywhere? Democracy, proper democracy. In my view, there's no democracy really anywhere in Africa, including in Botswana. I do not know whether that has to do with the fact that we come from a background where we had chiefs, and the chief pretty much controlled everything.
They were despots,
including public opinion. And we have accepted that institution as what should rule us. So when the advent of independence came, and we had politicians, the president, certainly in Botswana, became the new chief. He was now chief not of a part of the country, but of the whole country. And our perception of him and his political party and his government was that we had a duty of loyalty to him, to his government and to his political party. And that when elections came, we should elect him, his party, so that his government continues. I don't think we really had democracy. I've often referred to it as elected kings who we elect every 5 years. And these presidents that we have aren't really democratic themselves. They control their parties. For you to become a member of parliament in their political parties, you've got to support the leader of the party. If you don't, if you appear to support somebody else, if you appear to not quite hero worship him, to not quite idolize him, you are alienated. Only the people who idolize him, only the people who support him, only the people who let him pretty much control the party and everything are the people who get anywhere. Because then he'll support them in any candidacy, for any position for which they offer themselves, because he knows, and note this, it's always a he, it's never a she. He knows that those are the people who support him and who sustain him in his position. So he feels a need for him to support them and to make sure that they gain their positions that they want, because in that way he sustains himself. They'll be loyal to him and they'll sustain him, so he must also help them gain the positions they want. Anybody else, he eliminates.
What do you think is the worst of democratic bastardization in the case of Botswana and Swaziland and South Africa, those three countries? What do you think the politicians in those countries are doing wrong to affront democratic principles from where you're sitting?
I don't think it has anything to do with politicians, because I think politicians are the same everywhere. They do what is best for them, and they do what will get them into the positions in which they want to be. The country that I consider to be the best example, it's not the US, by the way, it is the UK. In the UK, I find that although far from it being a perfect democracy, it is the closest thing to a democracy that I have seen. I haven't studied and paid any attention to the Scandinavian countries, and I'm told they're very democratic. But I follow UK politics. I like the fact that the UK voter might have a party that they support, but they are more loyal to themselves than they are to the party that they support. That is why they are able to change parties at different elections. They pay a great deal of attention to candidates. They pay a great deal of attention to parties. If a political party does not do what they consider to be best for them and for the UK, they will vote that political party out of power. If a member of parliament does not serve them and their interests and the interests of the country, whoever that parliamentary candidate is, whatever party they belong to, they'll vote them out of power. I like the fact that they are able to remove a prime minister because he's lied. It is enough in the UK for a prime minister to lie and for that prime minister to be removed. It is enough in the UK for a prime minister who was elected on the basis of a certain program. If that program does not work, they do not waste time. They will remove that prime minister in a few weeks, in a few months. And that is something that's happened in the UK within the last few years.
Can you contrast the UK politics and the American ones vis Donald Trump?
Okay, America may perhaps be the next best democratic system with all the weaknesses that it has.
Do you think Trump is racist?
I think Trump is the creation of the American system. There is a sense in which Trump is like Adolf Hitler. Trump realized that the Democratic Party had alienated the American voter. The Democratic Party became too elitist. They became too much about college-educated Americans. They became too much about the middle class, and they completely forgot about rural Americans. They completely forgot about Americans who had no college education, Americans who had no education altogether, Americans who had too little education, and Americans who just lived in rural areas and carried on either as farmers or small business people. And those are the people who Donald Trump embraced. That is why they don't care about his language, what he says about anybody and how he says it, and the things that he does to people. Because he's very much a bread and butter person. And that is what people want. That's what people in the US increasingly want.
Do you think black people in America have anything to worry about with Trump being in the White House the second time?
I don't think so. I think to the degree that Trump might be racist, and I think he is, they don't really care because when he's president of the US, black people in the US believe that they get what they need. For them, it's about, I think, what they call their pocketbook. And they believe that their pocketbook is better when Trump is president than when anybody else is president, including Bo Obama and Bo Biden and all other Democrats who've been president.
Okay.
That's why a lot of black people supported Trump. A lot of black people, not just black people, but also Hispanics support Trump, because for them, it's about the pocket. It is about the condition of the economy. It is about prices. It's about inflation. They don't care about all the other things that he says and does, because those things don't really matter in their lives.
Okay.
That's the exact same thing that Hitler did. After the Germans were humiliated in the First World War, and their self-esteem were at its lowest, Hitler saw an opportunity to recreate German pride and to rebuild German self-esteem. And that is why when he came along, the country loved him. They didn't care about what he did to the Jews. They didn't care about his methods. The man gave them a pride that they had long lost. He revived them as a people. And that to them was the most important.
Are you familiar with what's happening in North Africa, where, before I get to I'll get to the Levant area, but before then, are you aware that in Libya and some of those North African countries, the Arab North Africans are selling African slaves in open and hidden slave markets? And are you aware that a lot of African people are working in the UAE, your Dubais and all that, as domestic workers and all that, and they are subjected to inhumane treatment?
Yes, it's our fault. We are not creating employment for them. They desperately need employment. So they go to the Middle East to seek employment. They withstand all those humiliating conditions because they have families to feed back home. And that to them is the most important thing. Also, the black people, some of the people these people who go to Europe on boats, it is for the exact same reasons. They become so desperate for a better life. They become so desperate for employment in better and thriving economies, and they will take the risks they do, travel across oceans in dinghies, risking certain death. A lot of them drown and never reach their destination, but their desperation is such that it is still better to try to go to those countries where they might find a better life for themselves and their families than to remain in their countries where there is no life. So it's really all our fault. We drive our people into that sort of desperation, a desperation that forces them to go to other parts of the world where they are treated very badly and they are humiliated, but where they can find employment and have a better life for themselves and their families.
Do you think African nations are incompatible with democracy and a desire for economic progress so that, they can have thriving economies as well?
Not at all. It's got nothing to do with who we are and anything inherent about us. I think it has everything to do with the sort of leaders that we have. But I see some I see some encouraging signs. For example, countries, especially in West Africa, these countries where they now have military governments, which came into power by way of a coup. Now, those governments are pro-African, and they are looking at their people. They've gotten rid of Europe and European governments, such as France, who are controlling them. They are taking control of their own affairs.
Do you think there'll be any consequences about those countries?
I think so. I think they are doing things better because they are inward. Like Trump, they are putting their countries first. And like Trump, they are doing what they think is best for their countries. And they are not allowing other countries, foreign countries and foreign governments to control and determine their affairs. They are taking control of their own affairs and trying to rebuild their own countries using their own resources, allowing very little, if any, control from outside their countries. And I think those countries, and it doesn't matter how those military governments came into power, it seems to me that what they are doing is the right thing for their country.
Let me just now talk about Namibia and Botswana. We used to have some squabbles and skirmishes of sorts with our army even being labeled as being trigger happy, shooting Namibian citizens who cross into Botswana in various ways. Sometimes they are thought to be poachers and illegal border jumpers and all that. So do you think better times are ahead for us with Namibia? Do you think we are mending fences, or what do you think will happen? More so that now President Masisi has vacated the seat.
I think so. I think Namibians used to come into our country, not Namibians, poachers. Some of them from Namibia, others of them from other countries via Namibia. Okay, and of course, the BDF were patrolling, okay, our game reserves and national parks in order to advance the fight against poaching. And of course, they would then come into confrontation with Namibians. Our soldiers tended to be trigger happy. There were other ways in which they could have dealt with the problem, but they tend to be too quick to shoot. In fact, I remember that when Tsegedi Kama was Minister of Tourism, Wildlife and Tourism, he used to say they should shoot to kill, which was not necessary. But having said that, we must also remember that poachers themselves carry guns, and sometimes they resist using guns, with the result that there is now a shootout between them and members of our military.
Do you think...
But the relationship between Botswana and Namibia, I think for all the things that can be said against President Masisi, and a great deal can, okay, he did try to work on a relationship with Namibia, and I think to a very large degree, both he and his counterpart in Namibia were able to improve relations, including relations between our peoples.
You think Namibia has been pacified? Do you think they've been pacified now?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
So do you think what the previous administration had implemented, where they made easy border crossings without passports and all that, do you think this new government will continue it? Do you think it will work towards this integration thing that we've been talking about? Or
I didn't really understand that old system of people not requiring passports, okay, to cross borders from one country to another. It seems to me that that sort of thing needs to be coordinated. If SADC is going to integrate, SADC must integrate as a unit. But because that is taking so long, and the reason it is taking so long is because, ironically, Botswana is one of the problems. So Botswana doesn't want people from other SADC countries to be able to easily come into Botswana, because they will now come and compete with us for the limited jobs that we have, for the limited resources that we have. The same goes for South Africa, because you see, Botswana and South Africa have the best economies in the region. South Africa first and then Botswana. Other countries don't do as well. And as a result, we are very protective. And we and the South Africans, more than anybody else, are the ones who've been standing in the way of integration.
Okay, so Masisi was also trying to extend the same, I suppose, courtesies to Zimbabwe.
Yes, but Botswana, you remember that when he tested that by stating it at a public meeting that he addressed in the area
close to the border,
close to the Zimbabwe border. But the response that he got from there was hostile. And the reason is because people feel that when you make it easier for people to come into our country, from Zimbabwe, for example, you make it easier for thieves. Because remember, there are a lot of Zimbabweans who've come into Botswana and committed crimes. And I think the reason President Masisi got that sort of response was not because the people of the area have anything against Zimbabweans, or that they do not understand the plight of Zimbabweans, and that perhaps we need to make a contribution to the improvement of the lives of Zimbabweans on account of the economic circumstance in their country. I think people are afraid of crime. That if you make it easier for, I mean, we have enough crime as it is. If you make it easier for Zimbabweans to come into Botswana, there'll be more crime. And I think that I think is what people were concerned about. That's why there wasn't similar outcry from the western part of the country. The system of crossing back and forth using IDs did not meet a hostile response from the Botswana who live in that area. Partly because most of them are originally from Namibia anyway, but also because Namibians who come into this country, and of course it's not all Zimbabweans who commit crime. In fact, I think the overwhelming majority of them don't. They come into Botswana and they do jobs that Botswana are not prepared to do. But enough of them commit crime. And I don't think we have that problem with Namibians at all.
So is it all gloom and doom now for integration? Because you said Botswana and South Africa have been in the forefront of stalling integration efforts.
Well, I don't think it is. South Africa, in fact, worse than Botswana, because remember, they keep having this, a lot of xenophobia in South Africa. The only people who are not affected by xenophobia in South Africa are Botswana, Swazis, and Basotho. But everybody else is. And that problem is much greater in South Africa than it is in Botswana. We're not xenophobic in Botswana. I mean, Zimbabweans come here and they work here. And nobody is xenophobic about that. So I think, and remember President Boko was saying the other day that he wants to take it further than did President Masisi. He wants them to actually have permits to be able to work in this country. Most Zimbabweans who work in this country don't have permits to live and work in this country. They are actually here illegally and they work illegally. But the government is
looking the other way.
Yes, giving a blind eye to it. Now, President Boko says he doesn't intend to give a blind eye to it. He's actually going to give them permits for them to live and work in this country. Okay. And his rationale is that the work that they do, most Botswana frown upon. Most Botswana are not prepared to do it. And I think he's right.
Okay, the last question will be in relation to gender relations in Botswana. How are we doing? Botswana, I know that there's nothing in the law in this republic that says a woman cannot be who she wants to be. Yet, as women, we still feel the pinch. We still bear the brunt in social circumstances and situations where we know that it's the man's world, so to speak. So do you think that, how do you think gender relations are in the Republic of Botswana?
You know, this men's world thing is everywhere. And I think it is historical. Most of our societies are paternalistic. And they've been that way for a long time. And I think it is a part of our psyche. And it has stayed a part of our psyche. Not just the psyche of men, but also the psyche of women. I have been an active politician. And I can tell you that in every political party in this country, most activists are women, not men. The most hardworking members of every political party in this country are women and not men. But when it comes to the election of the structures of the political parties, those structures are elected. They're elected by women for the most part. But the women will not elect other women. They would sooner elect other men. They would overlook other women.
Why do you think that
in
is?
preference for men? I think it's complex. I think a part of it is historical. Somehow, because men have always led, women think men can lead better. Men have always been considered the head of the families, and therefore the leadership role is for the men and not for the women. In my view, women have always been in control of society. The society in which I grew up in, the women was in control. In the home in which I grew up, the woman was in control. But her control was subtle. The man was the head of the family and he was regarded as the leader of the family. But in truth and in reality, the woman was in control. She made most of the decisions.
Flimsy decisions, Mr. Pilane, not meaningful things that relate to a family, the economy of the family and such. The men made the biggest decisions. The only control that the woman was over food, children, little things.
I'm not sure what you mean by the economy in the home. The men, okay, what work was done? We tilled land, we looked after cattle, we looked after goats, and we looked after sheep. The man was in charge of that.
And
we had fields. Women were in charge of the fields. The men went and tilled, plowed the fields, but left that to women. Women controlled that, men controlled and looked after the animals. That is a setup in which I grew up. But the reason it was that way was because we had a division of labor. When you and I live together, I'm not going to let you chop wood. I'm going to chop the wood. Because we regard that as less safe. Men are more suited to chopping wood with which we make fire than are women. We regarded women as more suited to cooking for the family than we did men. But when I grew up, we also cooked. It wasn't just the girls, our sisters and our cousins with whom we grew up who cooked. We also cooked. But when it came to chopping wood and to making fire, for the most part it was us boys who did that and not women. So I think that sometimes women exaggerate the degree to which men are in control of homes and families.
No, I wanted you to get there because, you see, I think you're an interesting interview subject in the sense that you have seen all the three worlds that a Botswana citizen can experience. You had a rural upbringing as a young person, and you later transitioned to an urban life as an adult, and you've also lived abroad. So these things make you a perfect candidate to talk about these kind of things. And ultimately, my interest is in gauging whether you think women are, crying wolf when they talk about, the subservient positions in our society. Because I think our society is not even sure whether it wants to remain traditional or modernize.
I think in part women are at the cause of their own problems.
How so?
A lot of our women, a lot of the women in this country who claim to fight for other women don't really fight for other women. They fight for themselves. They use other women to ascend to positions of power and authority. And once they get to those positions, they forget about other women.
They start thinking that one of the boys.
Yes.
They join the boys' club.
Yes. Mm-hmm. They forget about the women who got them there. And they actually even become nasty to the women who got them there. They work better with men who are their subordinates, and they treat their female subordinates worse than they do their male subordinates. I think that's a part of the problem. And I think that's a part of the reason why when female political activists elect structures, they would sooner elect males than they would females, because they don't trust these females. They think if we elect this woman to that position, she's now going to start oppressing us and that she's better than us. You see, men automatically get respect from both males and females who are their subordinates. But women don't think it's automatic. So they seem to think that they must prove themselves, and they must show that they are in authority. And I think in doing that, they then alienate their female subordinates.
What about the rural women? Do you think they're having it bad, or do you think they're having it easy? Because I feel like they're the most downtrodden subset.
I don't know. I have not seen that. I grew up in a home. Okay, I came from Soweto. Okay. Where my mother worked in the factories of Johannesburg, and my father had a little business, his own business. My mother made sure that my father brought what money home he could, but my mother made sure that in the home all was well. My father was head of the family because historically that's how it is. And by the way, this head of the family thing, wherever it came from, it looks like both men and women accept it. It doesn't seem like an imposition.
It's an imposition, Mr. P.
Perhaps historically.
Yeah. And
perhaps we've now accepted it. But when we came to Botswana and we lived in Mutshudi, my mother remained in Johannesburg. We lived with her sisters and their families. And her sisters lived with their husbands. I saw nothing but mutual respect between my aunts and their husbands. Yes, my aunts respected their husbands as males and the heads of their families. Never once did I see any of them disrespect their wives. Never once did I see any of them treat their wives as though they were children. And the men performed their role, and the women performed their role. The boys performed their role, and the girls performed their role. And another way I saw it was division of labor. It was never a question of superior or inferior. Everybody did what they were
sanctioned by the society to do.
Anatomically suited to do.
Okay.
The men did the works that required more physical, not hard work. The women that was done by women was also hard work.
Yeah.
But the men did the work that required physical exertion, that required the physical structure, the anatomical structure of the men. And the women similarly did the works that required the physical makeup of a woman. I always saw it as division of labor.
Having grown up in a family where your parents were of different ethnic groups, did you have any difficulty switching, for instance, from the Xhosa culture to the Tswana culture? How was it for you?
It was the same. I didn't really see. There'll be, because they are all African societies, the differences are very little. For the most part, subtle.
Okay.
But not so significant that they make too much difference.
Okay, so when Botswana women or any other group of women anywhere else in the world say that they want gender equality, what do you think they mean?
I think it is established that there are more men in positions of power than there are women everywhere in the world. I think it is established that on the whole, men tend to have more access to higher jobs, higher employment, leadership positions than do women. I think it is established that jobs held by men tend to pay more than jobs held by women. I think a lot of it inexcusable as it is historical, and that needs to change. It's not changing fast enough because of our mindset. And I think that is the mindset, it's the mindset of society. And the society includes both men and women.
Who do the Botswana women have to beg, ask, grab
No.
power from?
I don't think there's any power that needs to be begged for, grabbed for, fought for. In my household, I have a wife and we have children. And we talk about things. My wife is responsible for the overall management of the home. We have people who we have employed who work for us, who look after the home. My wife basically manages them and what they do. We have a dual, she does one part, I do the other part. My part is not better or worse than her part.
Let me say this, Mr. P. In the olden days, before all this modernity, Botswana woman had to get up in the morning to make sure that she goes to get something from the family farm to come and cook. She goes to get the water. She takes care of the children. She does everything. She even builds the hut, the mud hut, okay? And the man would be in charge of the animals. He goes hunting and he makes clothes out of the animal skin, blah, 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 right? So when colonization, even before the official colonization happened, when the white people came to Botswana or South Africa or anywhere else in Africa, they suddenly had all these jobs where they paid the men for their labor. And suddenly these men were able to buy all the shiny European goods to obviously improve their family
for
life.
their wives.
Yeah. So in a sense, I feel like the woman's position was downgraded because now she had to stay in the home while the man goes out to earn a living for the family, right?
Yes.
So now in today's time, it's the 21st century, and Africans, at least in the southern part of Africa, we live just like other people do in other parts of the world where we depend on money now to buy goods and services to survive, right? And I'm wondering if in my head, this tells me that the woman's position has been compromised because she used to be able to go and get things herself. She used to make things herself. Now she has to stay home and have her husband bring money or, the utensils and goods that she needs to run the family. So what's your comment on that?
By the way, it's not just Botswana or African society which is like that. It was the same in England. It was the same in Europe. It was the same in America. Women tended to be housewives. In fact, the concept of a housewife came from there. We in Africa, we didn't have the concept of a housewife because the men looked after the livestock, the women looked after the fields. In Africa, the woman has always had a role. She didn't stay home and wait for the man to bring anything. In fact, in Africa, the man didn't bring anything. The woman was in charge of the fields.
Yeah.
She brought
the food. She
the
brought the bacon home.
She brought, yes. The man looked after the animals and brought the meat home. The man, together with the woman, tilled the land because you use animals to plow and you use plows. And the women would hold the plow and the men would be pulling the cattle.
Yeah.
So they worked together. The men looked after and were in charge of the animals. The women looked after and were in charge of the fields. But they worked together and they pulled their efforts towards the needs of the home. So we didn't have the concept of a housewife.
Okay, let's bring it back to 21st century Botswana. What do you think is the status of women in this country?
We went to primary school with girls. We went to secondary school. We went to university with girls. They were always free to do whatever they wanted to do. We didn't get any preference in terms of what we did. They had the same choices of career that we did. We're in the same classes, taught by the same teachers, with the same equipment, the same everything. They were not disadvantaged in any way. We lived in the same homes, we went to school in the same places, and nobody, neither us as boys nor them as girls, were in any way disadvantaged. And the same went went for school, and the same went for university. And the same goes for the profession in which we are. Nobody stops any woman from studying anything they want, from receiving any training they want, and from joining any profession they want.
Are you
and
saying
having any career they want.
Okay, so are you saying that then the women who still think that somebody's holding them back are actually uttering some fallacy?
I'd like a woman who can show me who's holding them back, and back from what. The only places where I know is that there are more men in positions of leadership in this country than there are women. But I think women contribute to that. The majority of our society are women. The majority of political activists are women. But it is these women who elect the men over women. Men don't tell women not to nominate other women and not to elect other women. It is the women who do that. Maybe we should do more to get women to nominate and elect other women. Perhaps we are not doing enough. Perhaps society needs to address this as a unit.
Okay, so when at the traditional meeting places / kotlas,
Yes.
where all the traditional administration is conducted from, there are strict stipulations on how women should dress. Women are not allowed to wear pants, for instance.
Yeah.
Do you think that it is within the rights of the men in the traditional setup to dictate to women how they should dress at that place?
It's not the men, it is the society. It is the women. They are a part of the society that says this is how women dress. And the same goes for men. You must wear a jacket. You can't go to a kotla meeting without a jacket on. You can't go to a place where there's a funeral without a jacket on. These rules affect everybody. There are rules that affect women, and there are rules that affect men.
Okay, if
And all of them have their source in society and in the culture that's been created by that society. There was a time, remember, when women didn't go to kotla meetings.
yeah.
That changed. There was a time when women didn't vote everywhere in the world.
How I know
has
that it was at your village where women were first allowed to go to kotlas in 1977 or something like that. Before then, nobody else was doing it. So how did that come up? I don't know if you know how that came about, because I'd like to use the same steps to strike down all these requirements for us not to wear pants, especially in the winter time when it is cold and we have to be wearing skirts or dresses and having part of our legs exposed to the elements. That is very, very unfair, because we want to be comfortable and warm when the weather dictates it.
Yeah. I don't remember when it started,
Yeah.
and I don't remember how it came about. But go to Muchudi, go to Katleng and ask women whether they want to wear pants when they come to a
No,
kotla meeting.
obviously the older women wouldn't want it.
What about the younger women?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I would like that. Very
Then
much.
why aren't the younger women?
They don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Because they're not agitating.
That's why I'm asking you. I think I should get women together to come and engage you to go and have that thing struck down. I know that it's not a law, but whatever that needs to be done, we do not like it. We modern women don't like.
Yeah. It's a practice.
Yeah.
It's a practice that's carried on. It's a practice that's carried on. My suspicion, because it's been carried on for a long time, it hasn't changed. But I can tell you, if you go to Muchudi and you say to them that women should be allowed to wear pants when they come to kotla meetings, both men and women will say no. The women will be a part of the no. I'd be surprised if any women say yes. And if there are any women who say yes, there'll be few. You might also find some young men who will also say yes. But it also goes for men. There will be people who, trust me, I would prefer to go to the kotla without a jacket on. We live in a hot country. Doesn't matter how hot it is. I'm expected when I go to the khotla to have a jacket on. So that doesn't seem to feature. If women want to be able to wear pants to a khotla meeting because it is cold, men will also want not to wear jackets to go to khotla meetings because it is hot. Okay? But because it is a tradition that we've carried on, we endure the heat in the jackets that we are required to wear, and women endure the cold in the clothes they wear without being allowed to wear.
Isn't it a little odd that we are very stringent on that requirement, and you know, it relates to wearing European style clothes at a traditional Tswana thing, and we are trying to pass it off as a cultural thing?
Well, it's now become a cultural thing for us. We all do it, and we've done it for a long time. It's a received culture. In the same way that, look at the clothes I'm wearing. Look at the language we are speaking. Look at these books that I read on a daily basis. So much of our culture is received. And I think that goes for every society. Every society has received a part of their culture. So much has been adopted by everybody. And that's a part of the evolution of society. No society stagnates. Every society has been hunters and gatherers, but we have evolved from that life. The life that we live now in the 21st century, okay, we've evolved too, and all societies have evolved too, because we change, because society is dynamic. I am sure the time will come. Right now, I wear black robes when I go to court. There are countries where in America they don't wear black robes anymore. There are countries where these things are changing. The time will come when that change will also occur here. Our priests, when they go to church, they have certain clothing that they wear. It's a part of the tradition of the church. I'm sure the time will come when they will discard that and they will dress differently. It hasn't happened yet because perhaps the time hasn't come. Society is dynamic and we change. Why we change slower than we should is really something to which nobody can give an answer.
It's been such a great pleasure having you in this interview, just chit-chatting on things that I think are of interest to Botswana and the world at large. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, my dear. But there are things that we should not embrace.
Like what?
Like a lot of these values in America, which are... But that's a discussion for another time.
Okay. What about gay marriages?
Things like that. We don't want those things here. We don't even want the gay relationships. We don't want those things. There's some of the things that they do in the West, we don't want to do here. If we ever get to them, we should be allowed to get to them at our own pace. We don't want Americans and Europeans to tell us what to do. They've done too much of that.
Do you think our new government will legalize gay marriages?
I don't think so.
I'd
be most surprised if they did.
When a president, for instance, like a new administration like the one that we just have in Botswana, when they come into power and the people are saying we don't want certain things, whose interest do they act in if they just go ahead and say, well, the international practice or whatever is that, you know, we should allow same-sex marriages?
Then they will not be elected into the next government after 5 years. That I can guarantee. And they know it. And that's why they're not going to do it.
Okay, thank you very much.
The same goes for the death penalty. These are human rights people. But they know that if they abolish the death penalty, they probably won't come back into government the next time. They just understand that there are certain things that they can't do, certain changes that they can't make.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I've had a chance to watch the program, and I'm very impressed. And my question to you is, what do you think of the status of relations dealing with the patriarchal system or misogynism and so on after this interview? What do you, some of your viewpoints on the presentation, but also what is the conditions there currently, Merapelo?
Well, we have made very little headway. in terms of actual progress. But, governments are sensitive to criticism, and they kind of look at what we might call international best practices. So one of the nicest things is that we recently had an election in Botswana, and we had a total change of government after 58 years where one party was ruling. And we have young women who've been voted on a special dispensation into parliament. So usually when we talk about gender relations, people will point out to the fact that we have this many women representatives, in legislature or whatever. But that's not the only things that we are looking for. So I don't think we've made much progress, because when I look at all the totality of all the interviews that I've done this year, the views of the men, they are diverse. Men know what to say. It seems like when you try to ask them pressing questions, they say what they think women want to hear. But I also feel like it's something that's in their heart. But this interview that we're having today, we have diverse views, which I think captures the views of men in Botswana and Southern Africa at large. So I think it'll be interesting to hear what Dr. Pilane has to say.
The other thing, when I had a chance to watch Dr. Pilane, I was very impressed with his skill set of understanding international issues, his ability to challenge and raise concepts that are not always raised in our society. But more than anything, having traveled as much as he has and been in different countries, he helped us, many of us African Americans and people throughout the globe, to understand the challenges you face in Southern Africa and also parts of the world. The other point I think is very important is we don't have a lot of connections and news. And I go back to Solomon Plotty back in the 1930s and his quest to bring people who were Black throughout Europe, as well as in North America, Canada, as well as the United States together. So this conversation, I think, helps to cement some of those opportunities for us to develop greater relationships between Africans throughout the diaspora, but also to understand each other so that we have a greater appreciation of our respective cultures and the challenges we face in our current society, because as you know, we're moving to some turbulent times in our society, and it's important for us to join together. As that old African proverb is said in Setswana, people are people through other people, Bato. And so, and the other African proverb goes that when the spiders unite, they can tie up an elephant. So it's very important for us to not forget our historical and cultural roots that ties us together and that has not disappeared. But the question I have for you is, what do you think can come from women when they watch a program like this from their perspective?
Well, I think that we have a long way to go, because you see, this program is targeted at women in Southern Africa primarily. And it's sort of like a low-level type program, but it has an opportunity to expand and reach and have a global reach. So I feel like the more we have these kind of conversations, women can have a platform and a voice, because women's voices are usually disjointed. We only get to hear them around international commemorations of Women's Day and things like that. Or you know what I'm saying. So what I like about this program is that it gives ordinary women opportunities to talk about issues that concern them. Because when we start talking about international platforms, that it is reserved for, a certain level of women, not women like myself and those that I interview on the program. So this program, I think, has a lot of opportunity, potential to amplify the women's voice, ordinary women's voice, because obviously when we get to those high levels, people start talking about, feminism and these things. And, African women have been conditioned to reject those kind of notions, even though the ideas are for them. So I like that. I like where this program is going. And we are here to introduce a video, but I really like listening to women talk.
Good. It reminds me of oftentimes people would tell you what they do, but at the end of the day, they don't do it. And it's James Baldwin's the famous novelist who wrote about the African American experience and his experience when he lived in France and other places and countries. One of the things he is quoted for saying is, "I hear what you say, but I see what you do. And so at the end of the day, we have people who like to motor mouth or fat mouth or say things that they're going to do. But at the end of the day, can you measure the outcome? So it's very important that people's words, as Mr. Pilane reflects, that icon or that person or isoclax or a person who continues to challenge the status quo and not have an allegiance to the personality. So it was wonderful to hear what he had to say, and I was very impressed with his ability to deconstruct many of those things that those of us who don't read or don't travel, he made it simpler. He did as Malcolm X said, make it plain, and I was really appreciative of that. But hopefully this program can help bring us out of our cobwebs to become much more united and to be able to develop this family thing, because we cannot have a family without a man, a woman, and a child. And too often in our culture, we forget women, the importance that they've played to make us strong as well as our children. So this is a rewarding experience, I think, for many of our viewers or participants to understand that our goal is to bring us together and make this a better world than what we found that we came in. So any other comments or questions you would make about the program?
Yeah, and actually, I just wanted to let you know that I have failed miserably. I was trying to get high-level women in positions of power to come and talk to me because, I'm a non-entity yet. They didn't even want to talk to me. And, I was targeting women that I have seen over the years being in the forefront of the gender agenda, the female gender agenda. And, I have not had success, but it doesn't faze me because after all, I am an ordinary woman, and I think ordinary women can also do extraordinary things. Those who have achieved a lot and, they have international acclaim may not necessarily recognize our little efforts, and they may gatekeep, but, it doesn't matter. We still move forward, and I think eventually we will converge. So that's the one thing that I thought I should just throw out.
Well, let me backtrack a little bit. You're not an entity, you're entity of what we're about, making this program stronger. But one other point I would say, and I think it affects all of us in a sense, I use the word all of us. Sometimes we rise to the top, whether it be people of color, low income people, grassroots, women, you name it. And we get to the top, we forget where we came from. And so I think one of the challenges you face is that oftentimes these people have gotten to the top, and as Mr. Pilane said, they start to emulate or imitate men and become very oppressive, or they forget the struggle they went through. And so again, we face that same side of problem in our society here in North America as well in other parts of the world. Even though we may have women in leadership, sometimes they oftentimes don't reach back. And I say the same thing for us as in general as Africans or as Blacks. So if we're serious about the quality of life in our community, we should be able to interact with all segments of our society, not just the elites or the bourgeois or those who do not understand that there are many people suffering. And as Jimmy Cliff said in this song, too many people were suffering many years ago, and they're still suffering. And we're talking, that song is over 45 years ago. But we as Africans throughout the diaspora need to challenge our system institution. And if it's not serving us, then we need to get rid of it. And I think we see the waves happening across the continent as well as other parts of the world that, again, the leadership, it can be leadership if they're not sharing the wealth of our respective countries, nations, and communities. Because at the end of the day, we determine what the world is by our very numbers. But I really appreciate you being here, and we hope that people enjoy our programs, and we look forward to an exciting new year, 2025, where we can continue to throw down some heavy light.
All right.
As
Yeah,
we say,
thank you so much.
as we say when we end a program, Baroko.